The following is a RackRadioShow.com exclusive.
We have to talk about the DVD because, in case you've missed it, the highly anticipated documentary about Paul Heyman and his career was released by WWE this week, and Rock and I have both had a chance to watch it, and we have to talk about it.
It's an awesome story. It basically, it's his life story in the sports and entertainment business, and it started at a pretty young age.
He started his first business at 11 years old, and he morphed that. It was a mail order for movie posters, and he changed it over to taking pictures of wrestlers, and worked his way into the wrestling business as a photographer, and then as a promoter, and then he learned how to book, and he learned how to write, and he just took this journey where he went everywhere. So think about it, Paul Heyman's really been in the wrestling business since he was a teenager, probably 13 or 14 years old, trying to break in, and he's probably now in his 50s? 40s, 50s?
I'm not sure. I'll look it up. But yeah, he started very, very young. He started, as Lindsay mentioned, as a photographer, taking pictures at the old Madison Square Garden shows in New York. And he would take photos, and he would publish them in a newsletter or sell them to magazines and Bill Apter mags and stuff like that. He worked his way into he's 48. He worked his way into meetings, in creative meetings, into production meetings. He met Vince McMahon Sr. He tells the story, I don't know if it's on the DVD or the extras, because I watched both, how Vince McMahon Sr. would end up paying him $50 each week whenever he showed up to cover his travel, and when he handed some photos, which is kind of cool. So he starts with photos, taking photos, putting them in magazines and stuff like that. And they were in the programs and stuff, and that's where he would sell most of his pictures and what have you. And then he became a promoter for, what's the name of the club? Studio 54. Studio 54. And he worked his way. That's where he promoted his first wrestling event, believe it or not, which featured, because he became a photographer for Studio 54, and then the original photographer was drunk and got tossed out of Studio 54, and then Heyman became the head photographer, and then they needed to promote something on Friday nights, and Paul Heyman says, "Oh yeah, sure, I can do that." Just like he said, "Oh yeah, sure, I can take photographs just like that, and for magazines and whatever."
Why not? I've been doing it my whole life. Just the gumption of Paul Heyman. It's like, you have to admire him. Whether you love him or hate him, you have to admire just his sheer balls of steel.
Yeah. So he talks about that, and his first wrestling event, he was giving out an award to Ric Flair, WCW, I believe it was WCW at the time. Or, no, it was Jim Crockett. Flew Flair, Tully, and Arn up, I believe it was, they had a show in Philadelphia, up to New York, to Studio 54 in their private plane for Ric Flair to receive the award. He offered it first to Vince, but Vince was on the West Coast. He wanted to give it to Hulk Hogan, but they were out on the West Coast at that time. And it became his first wrestling event was giving an award to Ric Flair, and it was the first event for Bam Bam Bigelow, who became a big star in that time. And then he goes on to tell how he went to Florida, and he went to Jim Crockett Promotions. He went to Florida, he went to Memphis, and he had heat with Jerry Lawler. He was the manager for Austin Idol down in Memphis, and he just tells these great stories about going from territory to territory, and how he just hustled his way in every place. He tells an awesome story about Dusty Rhodes in there as well. It was like, it was basically, he said he wasn't supposed to be in the meeting. He sat in the back row. Dusty spotted him. He was like, "Oh crap! I'm about to be tossed out of here. I'm going to be sent back to New York, never to be heard from again." And then he just Dusty let him in, and he would take him under his learning tree, and every week Heyman would move closer, closer, closer until he's basically right next to him. as the story goes, it's a really fun example, especially just the backstory of Paul Heyman, how he was a manager, and how he just how he went from being a photographer, working as a promoter, but he's always had the passion to know about the business. That's basically was his goal, to learn about the backstory of the business. And it was a really cool story.
Yeah, I mean, especially given the time that he broke in, because that was still in the time when you couldn't get that kind of information regularly. It wasn't like it is now, where the business is fully exposed. The business was still very secret when Paul Heyman broke in, and kayfabe was very much alive. So to earn the trust of the wrestlers and to get in and sort of start learning the way that he did is really kind of a cool thing to hear and see. And I'm sure it was extremely difficult for him. Like, I think my favorite story that he told, or one of the favorite stories that he told, was when he was first starting out as a photographer, and he found out where Vince McMahon Sr. had lunch or had dinner after they worked Madison Square Garden.
Because he read it in a gossip column.
Because he read it in a gossip column, so he found out where Vince McMahon Sr. got his haircut, found out where he got, where he had dinner after the show. So then he proceeds to get the number for Vince Sr.'s wrestling promotion, calls up the promotion, and says, oh, well, he promised me a press pass, and, at such and such steakhouse when I met him there the last time he worked the Garden. And so, of course, they're like, oh, well, we're so sorry. And they send him a press pass. So think about it. He was, 15 years old?
Uh-huh.
And he got a press pass into Madison Square Garden, and he hustled his way in. It's just like, dude, that's amazing.
He's a born hustler.
He's a born salesman. That's what he is. He's just a pitchman.
Oh, he really is. We get told stories about ECW, but there's I think this was on The Exorcist as well. He tells this story. I believe it was Freddie Blassie. I think it was. He was offered to drive him home one day, right, back to somewhere in New York, because they had to go somewhere in New York back to Pittsburgh or whatever. I believe that was the direction. So Paul Heyman gets to drive with Freddie Blassie, and they're driving along, but Freddie's like swerving in and out, and like everyone in the road is yelling at him, and the whole time Blassie's like, this is how you get heat. See, this is the real kind of heat. This is the type of heat you gotta put on your guys, that everyone just yelling at you wherever you go. And Paul Heyman's fearing for his life because they're swerving around and all that stuff. And at one point, Paul Heyman just starts to freak out. And it's like, what are you doing? You're gonna get us killed. And then Blassie, and then they pull over, and Blassie's like, what do you want from me? I'm like 80% blind in one eye. So he can't see out of one eye. And Heyman's like, oh my God, what am I doing here? He got fears for his life. So again, as Lindsay mentioned, he's 15 years old at this point. So what does any good 15-year-old do? Hops in the driver's side seat and drives the rest of the way. Which is kind of awesome. Drives Blassie home. So at that point, if you think that's the nuts of the story, there's a little bit more to it. Paul Heyman's father comes against Paul Heyman because they were at Blassie's house. So his father because his father would always come and get him at the shows, but he said, I have a ride, pick me up here. So Heyman's father was a veteran of the wars, and so was Blassie, and they were sharing stories, and then this proud moment for Paul Heyman. He's all excited. Blassie is putting him over to his father. We all respect him. We like your son. He's very intelligent. Yada yada yada. Basically hyping him up like none other. But he tells his father, Heyman's father, your son is a terrible driver.
No.
He's like the worst driver ever. And then Heyman says, at that point, I just sink down in my seat as I was busted. One of the greatest stories. Yeah.
That's awesome.
We then get told about this time in ECW, and he said a lot of things, a lot of records straight about the finances, how they were paid $1,000 from ECW because they had a sponsorship deal with a record company for Too Cold Scorpio's music to be played on the show. Well, WWE wanted to use Too Cold Scorpio, so because they had a trade-off, ECW would send guys to WWE, and WWE would send guys to ECW to develop them, etc. But they had this one sponsorship, and if they lose Too Cold Scorpio, they lose $1,000 a week. So the ECW parent company was paid $1,000 every week by WWE, not Paul Heyman, to replace the sponsorship they were losing when they took Too Cold Scorpio, who became Flash Funk. You got a lot of behind the scenes. You heard from Gabe Sapolsky, Tommy Dreamer, Bill Apter, his partner Ron something or other, I can't remember off the top of my head, who was the producer and director of the TV show. You hear all these great stories about how they traveled together and all the stories about how they produced the show, and it's like, and then you get into the WWE stuff. It was a great DVD. It's a 2-hour long documentary. It's really, really good.
It's really very thorough, and there was some stuff missing. There was some stuff left out. Obviously, they can't talk about everything in his career, partially because some of it presents a conflict in terms of... I was really kind of hoping they would actually talk about him managing Taker in WCW, but obviously they can't. They're not going to show that. I say they can't, but they're probably not going to, because obviously The Undertaker is The Undertaker, and they're not going to show necessarily anything at this point outside of what he's done in WWE.
They covered one thing in there about the WCW lawsuit that because he got fired when he got fired. There was a lawsuit. There was he could not talk about it.
No, there's apparently a gag order on both sides that cannot discuss it. And he can discuss it, he just cannot discuss it on camera.
Right.
If it's in private and nobody knows, it's just, you and him sitting there shooting shit, and you're talking and he tells you about it, it's you find out what happens, but you can't talk about it. It's one of those best kept secrets kind of things. So yeah, but I found that interesting. He gets fired, and he sued WCW and he won.
Oh, for wrongful termination, yeah.
Yeah, but it's just there you go, Heyman.
And that's how he financed ECW off of that, and good in the stock market.
And also his parents. In the end, his parents helped out and helped to finance.
They became investors. The investor into the company, yes.
But unfortunately, that wasn't enough. And one of the things that I found really interesting was when they talked about the death of ECW and how Heyman specifically waited 90 days after the last checks had gone out for ECW before he filed bankruptcy. And I like how it was either Dreamer or Styles who set that straight. Where
Joey.
They said, it was Joey who he said there was a reason why he couldn't tell anybody. There was a reason why he waited that he did. So basically, because it's when you file for bankruptcy, any checks that you sent out 90 days before, the money can be recalled by your creditors. So Paul purposely waited 90 days before filing for bankruptcy to protect the money that he had given to the wrestlers and to anybody else that had worked for the company. So essentially, he made sure that he tried to do as best as he could to make good on their end before, at the end of the company, which is a pretty cool thing if you think about it.
Yeah, for everyone to say balance checks and all that stuff, and there were a lot of balance checks, and then you could have sued Paul Heyman. He was sued plenty. There's a lot of road stories about Paul Heyman and the extras that everyone needs to go watch. But it's something where he did right by the people who worked for him at the very end. They all got paid. If they were paid, they didn't have to worry about their money, as it was 2.5 months into his WWE career that he finally signed the contract.
Yeah, which is kind of interesting.
And then they talk about his WWE career, him commentating with Jim Ross for the second time. He says he's learned a lot from JR, and they actually do like each other. That he is a Paul Heyman guy, is Jim Ross. A lot of people are Paul Heyman guys and girls. Beth Phoenix was on the DVD. Edge was on the DVD, which was cool to see.
Punk was on the DVD.
Punk was on the DVD. So we got to hear about him writing for SmackDown, which was cool. You got a little bit behind the scenes there. Stephanie admits in the extras that she's a Paul Heyman fan. She's not a Paul Heyman girl. She's a Paul Heyman fan.
You know, honestly, in listening to Stephanie, I haven't watched the extras, but in listening to what she talks about, obviously I think she has a respect for Paul Heyman's talent. I don't think she necessarily likes him as a person. I don't think she likes to work with him, but I think she has a huge respect for what he's capable of and what he knows and what he can bring to the table.
I think they got tired of each other when he was on the writing team.
Yeah. Well, it's something you can tell in his personality that, you know, he seems like a nice person, but he's a very in-your-face, intense individual, and I can imagine that, you know, in creative, it's being a very creative individual. It's kind of your way or the highway, and that's what he wants, because he thinks every idea he comes up with is brilliant.
All right, Dreamer points out, and I think it was again in the extras, the whole thing, where you just poke at someone. Am I annoying?
Mm-hmm.
Am I annoying? Yeah, that's Paul Heyman. Just pokes at you. Am I annoying? Am I annoying? Am I annoying? And that sort of thing. So we got to hear about the behind the scenes of the writing and stuff like that. And we got to hear about him forming the alliance with Brock Lesnar. And overall, it was a really cool thing. You heard a lot of people really speak highly of Paul Heyman. And then at the tail end, the very last 10 minutes, you heard Natalya talk about how she can always go to Paul Heyman and she would give him straight shoot and give him advice. And he talks about coming back, how he never thought after December, where he had the big blowout with Vince McMahon, that he would ever be back, because he never wanted to be back. She could go to Paul and he would straight shoot with her. And then someone else had a comment.
Bray. They got Bray Wyatt on the DVD.
Yes, they did. And he talks how he makes you believe, Paul Heyman does. We got to hear about the Heyman hustle part of things and how the company he grew. So it was really cool. It was very, very informative. It's a fantastic DVD.
Oh, it is. I really loved it. I loved how it covered his whole career. And you got to learn things about him that you never knew. Like, again, for me as a fan, I never got to see ECW when it was in its prime. I wasn't watching when he was in WCW. So for me to see that and see how he evolved from being, you know, kind of that young kid to Paul E. Dangerously to, you know, in WCW and in the Indies, to ECW, to Paul Heyman in WWE, the first run, and then the second run, and kind of see how over really kind of a 30-plus year career, I would say, how he's morphed and changed and evolved and become this person that we see now. That's a really cool journey to see. Because it's something of, through that whole thing, and one thing that I love that they pointed out is he's kept his passion and his love for the business. Like, he says it multiple times. He's a fan.
Oh, yeah.
He's a fan of the business. And you see that he just loves what he does, and he takes such a pleasure and such an enjoyment from it.
Especially now.
And, you know, I think the cool thing about him is that his favorite thing to do is to make new stars, to work with young talent, and to help bring them forward and bring them into their prime and help them get to where they need to be. Oh, you can tell that that's where his heart kind of really lies, and that's really what he loves to do. He
does. He mentions they go into detail about his time in OVW and how he got to mold the future. He got to mold people like Beth Phoenix. He got to mold people like CM Punk. When they restarted ECW, the brand is like, I want him.
Yeah, it's like he got to mold and shape Brock Lesnar. It's something of, you can tell that that's what he enjoys to do, that's what he loves to do, and I like that they pointed that out on the DVD. And you can tell that Heyman has a tremendous amount of respect for the business, and the business, people within the business. Not everybody may like him, but they respect him. To a degree. To
a degree. Then he does have some detractors out there, but for the most part, people are fans because he's very good at what he does, and it's just, again, he's a born hustler, and this is one of those DVDs. They've had a good string of DVDs, from CM Punk DVD to the Rock DVD. There's one other that I'm sort of missing. I can't remember off the top of my head. The Triple H one. That's it. Mm-hmm. The Triple H one.
Triple H one was good, yeah. And they have several more in production right now, and their DVD, I should say, again, if I could talk, their DVD department is really kind of top notch, and they do a wonderful job with the documentaries because they go in depth. And they get the interviews, and they're not staged interviews. You can tell what people were saying, especially on this one. It was the truth. It may not have all been positive. But for the most part, it really was. And they look back into the history, and they kind of explore what makes this person tick and, who they really are. And I like how also people were talking about how he really changed when he became a dad.
Yeah.
And I loved how his perspective on how he's going to be judged for his legacy is not what he's done in the wrestling business, but what his children do. And that's going to be what his mark on this planet will be, is what his children do and become.
What's kind of cool, and then again, the extras part of it, I keep bringing this up because there's a lot of, it's a 2-hour extra thing. So you have a 2-hour documentary, there's 2 hours of extras.
Wow.
And I have a clip we're going to play of Joey Styles telling a story about Paul Heyman, which is hilarious.
Oh no.
But Paul Heyman's answering machine for his phone is him teaching his kid how to cut a promo.
Oh my gosh.
Is basically he's having the kid recite the lines for the answering machine, and it's basically him, verbalizing, teaching the kid how to do a promo on the answering machine, and they actually have the audio of it on the extras DVD. So yeah, that's something to see.
It has to be the cutest thing ever.
It kind of is. It's cute, and it's like, lay off the kid a second, Paul. She's just a young kid.
Gotta learn it, man. You gotta learn it.
Gotta teach them young. Like I mentioned, we have a clip from the extras DVD because Joey Styles. This is the first time he's telling a story about Paul Heyman. So I'm gonna let you guys listen to this. It's a couple minutes long, so sit back, enjoy. And I'm just gonna mention at the start of it, the grin on Joey Styles' face in the first 10 seconds, and you'll hear it, is priceless. So take a listen. Take a listen to this.
Do you have any stories of Paul lying to you?
Yeah. This is the first time I'm telling this story publicly. This is the first time I'm telling this story publicly. I asked Paul Heyman to be a groomsman in my wedding. It was all of my high school friends, who are still my best friends, and Paul Heyman, who I felt I deserved to ask because he had given me the opportunity to achieve my lifelong dream. The wedding was on a Sunday to not interfere with any ECW shows, so my friends from ECW could be at the wedding, and so Paul could be a groomsman. The wedding took place 15 minutes from his home on a Sunday afternoon. Paul Heyman no-showed my wedding. All my groomsmen were there because they came to my house the morning of the wedding. We were at the church. My wife was there. No Paul. I didn't have a cell phone at the time. It was 1997. I couldn't reach Paul. We waited for about 15 minutes and went ahead with the wedding. So, of course, we have the wedding ceremony, which was 90 minutes long. No Paul. We then go to take photos at a local park. No Paul. We then have the cocktail hour at my wedding reception. No Paul. We then get halfway through the wedding. Paul comes charging in with that power walk he does. He is obviously fresh out of the shower, in his tuxedo. The bow tie is not on. And I am furious. Paul has some cuts over here in what is his freshly showered wet hair and a black eye. And he comes up with this story that he was in the city picking up his date, a model. They were in a taxi cab and they got into an accident. And that's why he has the black eye and the cuts, because his head broke the window and he was in the emergency room and they didn't want him to leave. And he insisted on leaving so he could make it to my wedding. Now look, at that point I had been in our industry for 5 years, not counting my time at Pro Wrestling Illustrated. I know what sports entertainment injuries look like versus real injuries. Paul Heyman, to this day, as we do this interview, I've been married for 16 years. Paul Heyman is sticking to that story.
I was in a taxi cab and we got smashed. And then my car broke down in Westchester. Once I got to my car broke down off the exit.
Way to commit, Paul. That is commitment. To this day, he will not admit that he just missed my wedding because he was busy tending to ECW matters. Paul Heyman missed my wedding and beat himself up because he was so afraid of what I might do. Are you kidding me? I want someone who you interview to top that story. Really. Follow that.
I have no words. I just have no words. That is the most incredible thing I've ever heard.
I like Heyman's response. Yeah, we got in an accident, and I got to my car, it broke down.
It's awesome.
And he beats himself up, so it looks like he was beat up in an accident.
I love it. I know what sports entertainment injuries look like.
That was tremendous, yeah. So, we both highly recommend you pick up the new ladies and gentlemen, my name is Paul Heyman DVD, available now on www.shop.com, Amazon, and local retailers. It's worth the money. Yeah.
Yeah. If you're into wrestling history, if you're into really just anything even remotely close to wrestling history, this is definitely worth the watch. And if nothing else, it's 2 hours with Paul Heyman, where you sit down and you get to hear him tell stories, and you kind of see how he thinks and how he does things, because he does see things on another level. And dude, what I would give to just learn from Paul Heyman, because that's the other cool thing that they brought up that we didn't mention before, is in addition to helping to create new stars, he loves to pass on knowledge. He loves to teach and grow and learn as a person. And he does that by teaching others. There's a really cool story where Dreamer was talking about how Heyman taught him to edit.
CM Punk tells the same story when he was down at OVW. He invites you to the production. It invites you over to the studio to watch it. And as I'm doing it, I'm going to teach you how to do it. And that's what he does. And he teaches everybody.
Yeah, it's something if he passes his knowledge on, and what he gets from it is as he teaches that person the skill, he learns as well.
And hopefully, those people will then teach other people how to do it as well.
Right, which I found it really kind of interesting that Dreamer said that at the time that Heyman kind of pulled him aside and said, hey, do you want to learn how to edit? That wasn't done in the business. If you were a wrestler, you were a wrestler. You didn't do office, you didn't do anything else. So Heyman kind of sort of revolutionized that for a lot of talent, because it's like you found out, because I never knew this, that in ECW, Taz and Dreamer and Bubba and Devon were all in
Awesome.
the front office.
Bubba was the merch guy.
Yeah, Bubba was the merch guy. No,
Bubba was the promoter. Taz was the merch guy. He created the merch.
right. So it was really kind of interesting how ECW was run and how Heyman kind of broke down doors and revolutionized things in terms of the wrestling business and how things were done. Because he didn't stick to the old ways. He really carved his own path.
He did.
And it's cool as as somebody who maybe needs a little inspiration, if you're down on your luck or whatever, which I kind of am right now, to see that, it can turn out all right. You can follow your dreams and pursue what you want, and in the end, it will turn out okay.
Correct.
So, it's a very, very, very cool watch. It's actually pretty inspirational. And just to hear him talk and to hear him tell stories about his history is really pretty cool. Because it gives, at least for me, it gave me a whole new appreciation and a whole new respect for Paul Heyman as an individual.
Oh, yeah.
So yes, again, www.shop.com, amazon.com, and wherever DVDs are sold.
Get it now. It's kind of awesome, and you won't regret watching it. Spending 2 hours on the documentary. You've watched the extras. You got 4 hours, and there's a bunch of other stuff, matches and stuff included that I've not been able to get to yet. So it's worth the time. It's worth the money. It's worth the investment. Go out, buy it, watch it. You won't regret it.
You may learn something.
I know I did.
I did as well.